Hey everyone, this is Kwok from Philadelphia Triathlon Club. Today we have Brian Duffy Jr., who is one of the athletes from Team USA participating in the UCI Cycling eSports Championships on Saturday. So, Brian Duffy is from the Philadelphia area. His background is that he started as a swimmer, a club swimmer, as a youth in high school. He took up running, and then in the summers was doing triathlon to help with training. He then went on to Duke, where he competed on the cross country and track and field team, and then also was the founder of the Duke Triathlon Club. After college, he competed a lot more around the nation, ultimately winning the 2012 age group national championships. After that, he went on and got his pro card. He has competed in multiple Ironman Kona championships. Within the community, he is involved with the Philadelphia Triathlon Club and has served as a board member on PTC, helping with the direction of the club and just trying to grow multi-sport in the area in general. Most recently, Brian has moved on to Zwift and competed with the team. They have recently wrapped up season 2 of the Zwift Racing League, where they won the series again. So 2 for 2 so far with his team NeXT. And again, tomorrow, Brian will be competing in the UCI Cycling eSports Championships. So welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kwa. Excited to be here.
So appreciate the time you're taking out. I know you're thinking about the big race tomorrow, but wanted to share a little bit about yourself with the folks who will be tuning in tomorrow. So an interesting thing is you didn't focus on Zwift until March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. So what experience did you have riding an indoor trainer? And what differences did you find switching over to a platform like Zwift?
Yeah, sure. So I actually did have experience with Zwift, just not with Zwift racing. So I think I was actually a somewhat early adopter of Zwift as a platform, primarily to aid in my training for triathlon. I think I first maybe downloaded it in 2016 or so, but I had been a pretty consistent user of indoor trainers in general since I think 2010 or so is when I got my first CompuTrainer. Some of you might remember that as kind of being version 1 of the smart trainers. And
Those things are
then,
tanks.
yeah, I still have mine. Those are awesome machines. They just didn't really adapt to the times from a third party software standpoint. But yeah, when I heard about Zwift, I downloaded it and I was like, this beach just staring at a wall for a couple hours. Now I have at least something to look at. So I used Zwift for a few years, but only in a training capacity. I would always build custom workouts and just kind of hit go and put it on erg mode and that sort of thing. But it wasn't until, and I'd heard of the racing, I just never really thought much of even attempting it. But yeah, once the pandemic kind of broke out and all real life triathlons were canceled essentially, I was just looking for an avenue to get my racing fix in and to kind of channel my athletic pursuits. And a friend of mine who actually used to be a triathlete from the area, Mike Egan, kind of kept nudging me to give it a go. So eventually I jumped in a race after work one day, and then I was kind of hooked ever since.
No, that's I think a lot of the folks that came on to Zwift, I think they had their biggest 6 month registration period was during that time, and especially racing too. As you mentioned, everything was being canceled, so it certainly was an avenue to get a racing fix. And then along with the racing side of it, obviously there's all the teams racing. Can you tell me how the idea came about for your team NeXT and how that got off the ground?
Yeah, sure. So when I got into it, I didn't really know what when I got into Zwift racing, I didn't really know what the future was going to hold. Certainly, I did not think 2 years later I would be about to compete in a UCI sanctioned world championship. But hey, it was like a way to stay fit. It was fun, and I enjoyed it. I would have actually, so that was 2020. I was actually planning on not competing in triathlon that year anyway. Um, I had been in triathlon for over 15 years, competed in over 115 races and traveled around the country and the world. And I accomplished a lot of what I wanted to accomplish. And I was just getting to the point where there were a lot of diminishing returns on how much more I could achieve or how much more improvement I could see. So it was, and the amount of time that I had to invest, especially to compete like on the professional ranks, was just a lot, and it was not my number one priority in life. I was competing against guys who all they did was train. And then a lot of the races, as you guys know, were starting to be like canceled or consolidated. I really liked that Escape series, and that went away. So it just there wasn't as many compelling reasons for me to stay involved in triathlon. So I was planning to take a year off anyways, and then kind of reassess. So then the pandemic kind of forced my hand anyways. But yeah, found Zwift racing, kind of got into it. I was not very good the first few months. I mean, I was a triathlete, so all I could do was hold one power number for a while, and most Zwift races come down to a sprint, and so I had no idea how to do that. And but slowly got better over time, and maybe a few months in, I was just competing as an individual. A few months in, I joined a team, and that was the first introduction to team racing and how the Zwift algorithm essentially replicates like team dynamics that you would see outside on the road, and started to learn team tactics, and also I got to see the power and just community. It's one thing to just kind of do Zwift and race by yourself, but it's also like a really cool avenue to meet people, like-minded people from around the world. It's a very global platform, and I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. But that the team, had slightly different aspirations than where I thought we could go. So by the end of 2020, December 2020, me and two others that I had met through Zwift decided, hey, let's see if we can start our own team, build our own team, and our aspiration was to be the top on the platform, but also to have a very familial kind of feel. And it was very daunting at first. Like we were trying to figure out what's our value proposition. How do we get people to join our team when there are so many other established teams out there? Like there really wasn't any. But we kind of, through sheer luck and connections, we were able to add on a few guys. One of whom was Ashton Lambie, who's the world champion in the 4K in track right now. And other guys we would just race against on a consistent basis. We kind of added them, and we would have Zoom calls with them. We tried to make it much more personal, not transactional. And then we started putting up really good team results, and then it just kind of became a desirable team to be a part of. And this past fall, we officially kind of reached the top of Zwift from a team standpoint. Won the first Premier Division championship, and then we just won a second one, Puck, as you mentioned earlier. So we've kind of cemented ourselves at the top. But yeah. A little over a year ago, I didn't even think we would last for more than 2 months, and now we're doing pretty well. So it's exciting.
No, it definitely is, and I love how organic the story is, right? So the thing about Zwift is within the scene, it's generally pretty new with racing. So a lot of these teams that have come up, it's going against the grain a little bit, where they're not offshoots of traditional cycling teams, right? I mean, there's still some of that in Zwift, right? You have like the major tour teams that have kind of uh, organized a cycling esports team, but there's teams like NeXT and other teams that are organically coming together and forming the team. So it's almost a totally different landscape aside from the teams that you'd see on the pro tour that are sponsored by cycling teams or big brands, that kind of thing. So that's been really fun to watch and to see the different names and the up and comers within the scene.
Yeah.
So with
It,
the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, actually, I think a conscious decision of ours was, and I think I may have even ran some ideas by you back in the day when we were first starting. Was like, hey, how should we brand ourselves? And one thing that we tried to capitalize on was Some people don't like Zwift because they try to compare it to outdoor cycling. And what you have to understand is it's not outdoor cycling, it's its own discipline. Certainly, there's a lot of correlation between the two. But we wanted to embrace the fact that it was athletics meets like video game. And that was a little bit of the genesis for like our branding and our logo. And we just kind of like ran with it. And, I actually didn't realize how much of a monster it was going to become. I spent a decent amount of time riding. One thing I like about Zwift is it's not very time consuming to be good, but I spent a lot of my time doing this, like the management of the team. We have like sponsors now. We have great swag and apparel and all that kind of stuff. And there's always like new ideas that people on our team or people are coming to us with. So it's been fun just kind of managing a lot of the organizational aspects.
Yeah, and certainly the exposure has broadened as well. Just this past season, a lot of us have been watching the races live on GCN and Global Cycling Network, and they have dedicated commentary. They'll do the interviews and such after the race. So it definitely is something that has begun to have more media coverage than in the past. So I'm sure that's another area of time where you have to devote as well, doing a lot of that follow up with the folks that are covering your races, especially as one of the top teams now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was big for the sport when GCN came on as the broadcast partner this past fall, and I know they've been tracking pretty closely, like the number of views for those races each week, and I think each season they've kind of incrementally grown, which you would expect. So it's exciting to see where things could go. So yeah.
And you alluded to this a little bit, talking about how do you brand your team. But one of the things we commonly see is that skepticism you talked about, that it's not real racing in terms of cycling. It's not meaningful. And I think you had a great response to say, listen, it's a totally different discipline. It's mixing video games and athletic ability. Anything else you would add to that in terms of how folks view racing on Zwift, and especially within the esports realm?
Yeah, well, it's so maybe one of the downsides to the world is there is some toxicity here and there, but it's kind of the case for any sport. But the genesis for a lot of it is like sometimes you have your purist outdoor riders who maybe just can't quite comprehend why somebody with no cycling background like me can be doing pretty well. Like early on, when I kind of broke into the top ranks, like I was just subject to some criticism until like there's really nothing to go after there. And sometimes you get like these Tour de France riders who come in and like Mark Cavendish, I raced against him and I dropped him on a hill. It just there's a lot to the gameplay that you just have to you have to get used to it. It's as much of an art as it is a science. And yeah, the raw power is very important, but so is just understanding momentum, the physics and tactics and all that sort of thing. And yeah, there's a lot of parallels certainly to outdoor cycling, but even Matthew Vanderpool did a race once and he got dropped on a hill. It's just you kind of have to get used to it. Also, the riding styles is a little bit different. Aerodynamics does not matter. If anyone has watched any of my streams, I pretty much ride standing up out of my saddle for 90% of the race at like a 65 RPM. And that was not intentional. When I first started, I was probably in the saddle riding 90 RPM, like from triathlon days. But over time, I just kind of slowly evolved to this different kind of pedaling approach that I just found to be a little bit more efficient for indoor riding. And that's kind of the name of the game. Is just how do you maximize the performance of what you're doing. And so there's a few subtle differences between indoor and outdoor.
Right, and I think that's the important thing that you've stressed, is there's definitely the differences in the discipline, just in terms of the environment, the riding style. There's a common denominator with raw power that's important, but certainly the nuances with the strategy, the tactics, and especially the team element as well. It makes it on its own leg, as opposed to trying. Oh, it's not real cycling. So that's a great feedback to that. So with the big race tomorrow, I mean, how do you prep for a big race like this coming up the next day as opposed to prepping for, say, an Ironman the next day? Like, what's the differences in how you do the prep process?
Yeah, well, maybe taking a step back, I'll just talk in general about the prep for Zwift racing versus triathlon. So, as you guys know, triathlon, I was like a workout machine. I mean, everybody is. I just had a very structured plan. I knew the week ahead, the month ahead. I knew in general how the entire year was going to play out. And every day was, execute some kind of specific objective or purpose within your swim, bike, or run. And then maybe 5, 8 times a year, you get to kind of lay it all out there in a race and see how the build and all the training kind of manifests within a race. Zwift is the total opposite, which I've kind of enjoyed about it. Although I've gotten to the point where I'm competing in some pretty big races. It's number one, it's just a little fun hobby of mine. And I haven't done a proper workout in 2 years now, probably since when I started it. I basically
Oh,
either
wow.
I basically either like an interval workout. I basically either race or I just ride super easy. Because I'll race 4 times a week. Because the great thing is, if you have a bad race, you can just sign up for another one the next day, and
That's true.
and try it all again. You don't have to wait 2 months and travel, via plane or whatever. But I will try to tailor the races that I compete in, or like the races that I do, to simulate different energy systems, or I'll just employ different tactics. So sometimes I'll intentionally try to do a breakaway or wait to the sprint, just so you kind of work in different areas. But yeah, that's so. Anyways, at a macro level, it's been very different. As far as the specific race, it's kind of coming up at the end of our recent Premier Division season that just wrapped up 2 weeks ago. So kind of riding a lot of fitness from there, but then certainly over the last few weeks, I've been just doing specific prep for this race. It's going to end on like a 2.5 minute climb, so I've been trying to work on a little bit more on 1 to 2 minute power. It's probably not going to be just like a pure 15-second sprint like a lot of races are. So really just trying to build that strength and that kind of closing speed up a really steep hill. And kind of preview the course a bunch and that sort of thing. And actually, all the athletes competing in the race tomorrow were supplied a Wahoo Kicker V5 to just try to standardize the competition. And I've actually been working closely with Wahoo engineers over the last month or two on just improving their product and their algorithm so that's as best as possible for tomorrow. One other difference between when I was doing triathlon versus now is, although I was attentive of power meters and all that thing when I did triathlon, nowhere near as detailed as I am now. A lot of Zwift racers have dual and triple recordings of their power and are analyzing I'll look to see how the power reads on gradient changes at high flywheel speeds, and you kind of just can get lost in the weeds. But it's really important because at the end of the day, it's a game of data, and you need to make sure that the data is reading as fairly and accurately as possible to kind of level the playing field.
And I believe you have a triple recording. Is that correct?
I can triple record. I don't do it as much anymore. I used to, but yeah, I have a Quark D4 power meter, which is always my secondary source. I do have Garmin pedals. I don't use them anymore, but if I need to, I can throw them on to have a third source. But then your trainer is always used as your primary device. That's the device
Mm,
that sends power to Zwift, and it has to be used to basically dictate your game performance.
okay. So for the big UCI race tomorrow, other than the finish being uphill where they're generally sprint finishes, anything else they have done for the course or the race in general to make it a little unique or stand out from the typical Zwift race or say a Premier League race?
Yeah, it's a little bit. So I think tomorrow's course is gonna be tough. It's a little bit longer. It's 55K, so it's about 36 miles. A lot of elevation. We'll do KOM 3 times, and then to New York City. For you guys know that course, and it's just generally a lot of undulating terrain. Another difference is the power ups are fixed. So you kind of at various banners, it's a fixed power up. So it's not like a game of chance like a lot of Zwift races are. So you kind of
Oh,
know
okay.
what to plan for. But I would say that the most unique aspect is I'm not racing for my team NeXT. I'm racing for Team USA, and we've been having some Team USA meetings over the last couple weeks. But yeah, you're basically trying to suddenly create team chemistry and loyalty for people who ordinarily a lot of us are rivals in like the club racing scene, and now we're teammates. And then even further, some of my teammates on NeXT are my rivals because we're a pretty international team. So we actually have athletes competing from 6 different countries. So that's actually going to create like a really interesting dynamic. Is like you're racing for your country as opposed to your club. But yeah, we've been kind of having strategy sessions, and everybody on the team kind of knows their role and their responsibility, just like an outdoor cycling team would be. You have some guys who are kind of more the enforcers and are trying to control the pace, close down breakaways, maybe provoke a little bit to create some aggression. So it'll be really key that we just have good communication throughout the race, and we're attentive to the dynamics that are playing out, because I fully expect the race to just be full gas throughout. People constantly trying to get into breakaways, especially those who don't think they have the closing speed to win at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an exciting race to watch, and especially coming off of 2 weeks after the end of the Premier League, when all like you said, all the athletes were on the same team, and now they're kind of like split up again by country. It'll be interesting to see how the dynamics play out, and what everyone's strategies are. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be another step forward for the cycling esports scene to have this type of profile race on tomorrow. Um, Lots of publicity, a lot of hype. What do you think after this race is the next big step, or next series of steps to take cycling esports to another level of popularity?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that we as a team think about a lot because, hey, in addition to just wanting to be a great team and race well, we also see ourselves as stewards of the sport's growth, and kind of take that responsibility seriously. But um, what I and I would just say, actually, like with our team, we've actually been able to get a lot of like sponsors, or a decent amount of sponsors to support us, and I think that's actually one thing that's really important, is for us to prove that, hey, it's worthwhile for sponsors to be in the sport, because sponsors and money and product and all that stuff is really helps fuel anything's growth. So we try to, at a minimum, do that for on behalf of our sponsors. But just from a racing standpoint, so just recently they actually announced that the third Premier Division season, which ordinarily takes place like April and May, was going to be basically nixed for this year, while they're trying to do a couple things. One is continuing to try to just figure out how to further improve the integrity and credibility of the sport. Right now, there's like a lot of different trainers that one can use. There is a list of what's allowed, but I think they're trying to assess, like, hey, can we standardize this even more? Kind of like what we're doing for Worlds Tomorrow. We're all using the same manufacturer, and there certainly is some variance between manufacturers, but there's even variance within a manufacturer. Um, I think there's still opportunities to improve the signal, Bluetooth, ANT, whatever. It's like people have different interference, and that can skew things. And I think there's more Zwift can do to just continue to improve their gameplay a little bit. But also, on a more exciting note, one reason that they're deciding to just put that on pause is they're also going to be experimenting with different racing formats. So this spring, we're going to be doing some 1v1 kind of, or battles, like one team versus another team. I imagine we'll probably be involved in some of those. I think they're going to be considering maybe like some stage races. So I think they're just trying to find like different racing forums, and try to see, hey, what's not only interesting to the riders, but probably more importantly for sports growth. How can we make this a consumable and watchable product for people to follow along and be fans of? So so
Right.
it's good to kind of test and learn.
It definitely is. I think that's an interesting point about what format can we make this viewable, because I think it's been put out there a few times that the founder of Zwift wants to make cycling esports an Olympic sport. Like that, I think that's like one of the ultimate goals for him. So to get there, it definitely is to figure out, how do we generate audience interest and viewership so that it does make a strong case to be included someday.
I didn't know that, but it's pretty lofty ambition there.
Yeah, definitely lofty, definitely lofty. But it all starts somewhere, and what what's going on right now with the UCI having the championship race. What the different teams such as NeXT doing to broaden exposure. That's where the foundation is to ultimately get to a goal like that.
Yeah, yeah. One other difference between tomorrow's race and Premier, but also an evolution within the Premier division, was tomorrow's simply just a scratch race. First across the finish line wins, um, which is like most races. But one thing that they've been increasingly experimenting with within the Premier races to make it more fun to watch, so that you're not just waiting around for an hour until to see who does something at the finish line. Because right now the gameplay isn't super favorable to breakaways. You can do it, but it can be tough. Is they have a lot of intermediary preems sprint points. So instead of it being a scratch race, it's a points race. So whichever team accumulates the most points wins, and you can get points at sprint banners, throughout the race. And they've been slowly increasing the value of those so that it deprioritizes the finish line and incentivizes more aggressive racing throughout. And then they even threw in a couple different like bonus structures this past season. So I think they're going to continue to play around with that so that you have an hour of 45 minutes to an hour of interesting riding throughout.
Yeah, I think that race within a race type element is certainly something that makes it interesting throughout. To your point, it's like, okay, it's someone watches the race maybe after the fact, and generally they'll just go to like the last 3 minutes of the race. Just take the YouTube, fast forward to the last 3 minutes. Okay, let's see what happened, because they kind of know the result. But having the intermediary sprints and the points with the race within a race type of vibe, it certainly does make you more vested to see, okay, like how did this play out through the entire race, as opposed to, okay, how did the last 3 minutes go, or even the last minute, okay, who won the sprint? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
Cool. So just to wrap up with a fun question. So if you had to pick one, would you rather do the Everesting Challenge? So that's when you ride Alpe du Zwift 8.5 times continuously, or race another Ironman?
I have no interest in going up Alpe Zwift 8.5 times. So yeah, probably do the Ironman. But I always I did Kona 3 times, and I was to kind of reflect on my own triathlon career. It's probably the one race where I always wish I had done a little bit better. It's just such a difficult event to execute well in. Just the conditions are tough, and I never really saw Ironman the distance as my strength, anyways. But I was certainly always well prepared and fit going into it. So I kind of always thought, hey, I would love to return at some point and put myself through all that torture again, and probably, you know, let my not accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish. That plane ride home was always so depressing. But
I
but
still
yeah,
remember the one plane ride home where you finished a race and you literally started like your first day on the job.
yeah, that was 2016. I had to start work at a new job on Monday. The race was Saturday, and they wouldn't let me delay it by a day. But I literally couldn't get back to the East Coast in time, so they let me do my first week in the San Francisco office. So that was very depressing plane ride. Didn't do quite as well. I was leaving awesome Hawaii and going back to the cold, and I had to start a new job. So yeah, I guess based on your question, I would say of the two options, probably would want to try to give Kona a go again. But I'm nowhere near equipped to do it right now. I hardly ever run or swim anymore. So, and in fact, when I do run now, I have like calf problems. I think I've been biking too much that I've created all these muscular imbalances, and now I keep getting calf pain when I run.
Well, someday. So, I wanted to thank you to hop on, giving us a little insight into your journey within the cycling esports world, talking about your team NeXT and the big UCI race tomorrow. So best of luck. Where can folks follow you and the NeXT team on the socials and different websites?
Yeah, probably the best for following the team is our Instagram account. NeXT eSport PB Onshore, I think something like that. I don't.
We'll post it as well.
Yeah, that'd probably be the best way to follow along. And we've been doing some cool stuff. We've been doing some rider takeovers. We've been trying to humanize the sport a little bit and give people an inside scoop on what goes on behind the scenes. And so that'd be the primary avenue to follow along the team. And then for the race tomorrow, GCN will be broadcasting it via YouTube, so you can kind of log into YouTube and watch the coverage. And then personally, I stream my races on YouTube, although we're not allowed to do it for tomorrow's race. Um, but some people, for whatever reason, enjoy watching those streams.
No, it's you know what a lot of the um, a lot of the interest behind Zwift is that you can watch other people do it, right? It's one of those things where people are streaming the races. You can kind of see like how they approach a race, different power levels, and I think that's one of the cool things about cycling esports is to have that insight into the riders themselves. It's hard to follow along a triathlete, every minute of the race, but tomorrow when we watch you and the other athletes compete, we'll be able to see, okay, this guy is doing this wattage, or here's what's happening at this point in the race. So it's going to be very cool to watch. Obviously, best of luck to yourself and Team USA. Best of luck to all the athletes tomorrow as well. Just have a great race.
Yeah, thanks, Squawk. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks again, Brian. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.